I think. And that's from just one sitting. Some schools will use like best scores from different subject areas and combine the best ones. But UCs don't do that. It's just the best score from one day. You could take it more than once. I generally don't recommend students taking it more than 3 times because it is stressful, and studies have shown that after the second and usually the third time especially, their scores usually don't improve in a dramatic fashion. So that's generally my recommendation based on what I've read and researched, but in the end it's up to you because always it's your choice. And that's the great thing about the United States. You could apply to one university or 10 or 50. 50 I wouldn't recommend because your parents are going to cry at the application fees. And all the essays you need to write too. But we do emphasize more on your grades and the strength of your classes than the SATs. But again, each college and university have different competitive level, and 2029s may not just maybe decent at some of the private schools that are Ivy level and the private schools. But I know in the public institutions it's extremely high, and I know that generally based on students that take the SATs every year, that is very high. And again, there's no minimum cutoff for the SATs. Is it possible for students to have like an 1800 in the SAT and be admitted to UCLA? Of course. But again, because we emphasize more on the strength of classes and the GPA you've earned. One other thing I want to mention about this is that in UCLA's review, and a lot of the universities these days, is not just the straight GPA, but how well you do in your high school that you're attending. Because not all classes are offered at each high school. Some schools may offer more high-level kind of courses. Some schools may not. If you're going to a school that doesn't offer as many honors AP, then the high school that's 5 miles away. We're actually looking in most times how well you did amongst your peers, with your classmates. And that's actually more important than, my GPA is 4.3, and that may be one of the best GPAs in your high school, but that may be more like top 15% at the high school 5 miles down. Well, again, if you're one of the best students in your school, we're gonna know that, and we're gonna recognize that. So it's more important than how well you do in your high school. Any questions? I could talk about this all day, but I still have plenty of time. The other 2 ways to be admitted in the UC system, number 3, the examination by alone, we really don't use it. It's still possible, but if that means you need to score really high in your SAT scores, and that's not the most UCLA, historically, we have never admitted students based just on the SAT scores. Good example. I have a student that I read, I think last year. I get this every year. At least a couple of students that had 2400, 2390. I'm sure someone had 2390 just crying because one more exact answer, right? But their GPA was okay. And the okay GPA at UCLA may be about a 3.8. 3.9 weighted. That's about the average of the students that apply. That's not very competitive. And again, because we emphasize on, if we talk about just the academic portion, on your grades more than the SATs, that student probably was not admitted. I know that I didn't recommend that student for admissions. So that's something to keep in mind. One other thing though, number 2, eligibility by local contacts, often called just ELC. One thing that has also changed is that instead of the top 4% of students being guaranteed a spot in the UC system, it has changed to 9%. One thing to keep in mind about the guarantee admissions, which is what eligibility local context is, it may not be the school of your choice. So it means that even though you're top 9%, you are going to be guaranteed a spot. And students that are ELC last year was top 4%. So even that pool was very much smaller. The admissions rate for ELC students, because we consider that an achievement, but we don't say like they're automatically, they have 50% chance or something like that. But last year it was probably close to 60% of students that were in the top 4% of their high school were offered admissions. But there is not a guarantee. But if the student didn't get into UCLA and they were ELC, they might have been contacted by another more accessible UC campus, usually Riverside or Merced. They might have been contacted by those schools to see if you want to attend it, if you didn't apply to, or if you didn't get into any of the UCs. Okay? So again, if you're an ELC student, don't think like my first choice is LA or my first choice is Berkeley. So if that's the campus I apply to, I'm gonna automatically get in. No, it's not like that. You're gonna be very competitive because you did so well in your high school academically, but it's not a guarantee admissions to the choice of the UC, just the system. One of those 9 campuses, and again, it's usually highly likely it's the most accessible campuses, which is Merced and Riverside. So, academics is the most important part in the admissions process, but UC system has what's called a comprehensive review. So there's 3 main things that we consider in the admissions process. The first one is academics, the things I mentioned, your grades, the type of classes you take, even your standardized tests like the SAT or the ACT. But that's not the only thing we consider in the admissions process. There is that personal statement in which you get to tell us about yourself and what you think is very important that we should consider for admissions. There's also the things like extracurricular activities there's a section for that as well, where you could list awards and honors that you may have earned. There may be sport, there may be musical, there may be some kind of volunteering, it could be scholarships, it could be academic decathlon. There's a lot of different kind of opportunities to, show and shine and your abilities. There's also a section for if you worked. It could be for actual, work for your parents or what have you. There's a section for volunteering. There's a section for activities. There's a section for special programs that you may have been involved in. So there's a lot of opportunities to indicate what you have been doing outside the classroom as well. So those are the 3 things that we consider in the admissions process. And what we do at UCLA and Berkeley, and also some of the other UCs have gone into the holistic review is, I'll hold off on the holistic review. All the UCs consider these 3 things: academics, personal statement, things you do outside the classroom. And don't feel like it has to be some kind of, I avoid using extracurricular activities because a lot of students think that it has to be something that has to involve school or some kind of volunteering. Again, as I mentioned, some students, because their family have financial difficulties, they may have to work. Or the students they're caretakers. I've read enough students' applications where they have to go home right away because they have 5 siblings that they have to take care of. And so there's going to be limited opportunities to be involved in clubs and organizations. But if you could do both, of course, again, you're making yourself stand out even more, and then you may be more competitive for admissions. There's no set one specific way to get into universities. It may not be very competitive or more accessible, but the more you do, the more accomplished you are, and whatever your endeavors are, the more competitive, the more you're going to stand out amongst the other students that have applied to that university. And keep in mind, if a student is exceptional, like even amongst the 60,000 students that apply to UCLA, and we think that this is one of the top 10, right? But again, as long as you're in the top 12,000, you were admitted to UCLA, right? And that's like that with all universities too, okay? Some university will admit a lot more than that. Some university will admit a lot less than 12,000. But you just want to be competitive enough. There's no really specific cutoff line. What is better? There's some things and aspects in which some are better than others. But both students might have done and accomplished enough in their context of their life and environment to be admitted to the best universities in the United States. One thing I do also want to add about the personal statement is that we have a little, handout there, so please grab one. But in my table after all this, is that we want to get to know you. That's the most important thing. We're not your English teachers looking for the best written, best organized, essays you write. Of course, that will help, because if you're conveying your message clearly, then we understand what you're trying to say. But, in most cases, the personal statement in the UC system is that it will only help you in the admissions consideration. It's not going to hurt you. So all these factors that we talked about, this is the starting point. Is there anything to help you make you look more competitive? We're not going to downgrade you based on some of the things in most cases. So very important to keep in mind. Another tip that I tell students about the personal statement is it is personal in the sense we want to get to know you. That's my mentality when I read applications and the personal statement section. So you don't want it to be the perfect essay that your English teacher would like. It's about conveying your interest. You want to be genuine. You don't want to make it sound like you're manufacturing things or even exaggerating, because we're pretty good at what we do, and I'm pretty good at what I do too. So when I know that students have gotten a lot of help, and I'm sure the parents won't do this, but I have read some essays in which the parents pretty much wrote the personal statement for them because they made little mistakes, like my son in the personal statement, which doesn't make any sense. Unless the student had, a very young son that could write really well. So we do have some checks and balances within the system as well overall to look for those things. One last thing about students, the personal statement is ask at least 2 or 3 people to read your personal statement, at least one person that knows you decently well, because then they'll give you some feedback on what you're highlighting, and maybe you're missing some of the things that really is unique or that's exceptional about you. So you get some good feedbacks about, have you thought about those things? The other thing is that you want to ask someone that doesn't know you very well, because I don't know you very well either, and that's the opportunity to do so. So you're going to get different kind of feedback from someone that doesn't know you very well. Find out what they think, or what you wrote and what they think you wrote. Because if they say that, yeah, you are this kind of person because of these things, and that's what you're trying to convey, perfect. But if they say something totally different than what you wrote, then you probably have to change your personal statement a little bit, or a lot, depending on what they say, to make it more clear on what you're writing. So, holistic review. As I mentioned in the previous slide, comprehensive review has 14 points. Those I briefly summarized into 3 things, but there's actually 14 things that we consider in the admissions review. And in past history, sometimes some of the universities have had one person read the academic section, another person read the personal statement section. What has changed at UCLA and a lot of the UCs now, because it's not just UCLA and Berkeley now, but San Diego, Irvine, I think Santa Cruz, and I'm leaving out one other campus, have gone to this holistic review. Holistic means just one person reading the application in its entirety. So then we get to know the student not just from the academic side, but who they are. And I think that's a better way to understand who the student is. So that's what we do. And what happens is that all applications are read at least twice. So if I read a student's application, someone else that has been certified to read applications at our office will read the same application. And we'll give our own independent recommendation. And if those 2 recommendations are very, very different, then another even more senior and experienced person will read that application. And I don't know who that other person is. So we can't discuss, someone offered me $100,000 to admit that student, and I'll split it 50-50 with you if you do. Which I wouldn't do. I love my job. I don't want to get fired and go to jail. So, but that's where it's, we have the security measures to keep it from those things possibly happening. And usually we do this checks and balances all the time. And because the training and the certification is done so well and thoroughly, the people that make the recommendation for each applicant is very similar or identical. So that's very important to know. And sometimes we read more than twice. And some of the exceptions may be for the College of Letters and Science, which is about 85% of the majors offered at UCLA, and that's the majority of majors are offered through the College of Letters and Science in each UC campus. All you need to do is fill out your application, submit it, and wait for the decision sometime in the spring. But there are some specialty schools, like if you're a music major, most schools require that in addition to submitting your application, you do an addition. If you're an art major, you need to submit a portfolio. So in those kind of specialized schools that require what's called a supplemental application, so in addition to the general application, there's a supplemental additional things you need to do. Those will be reviewed by the department that oversees the major, and they usually have a very important part in who they want to admit or not. Most other majors, though, is decided by the undergraduate admissions office in most cases. I know that that's the way it works in the UC system, but private schools, I don't really know. So under the comprehensive review, we use what's called a holistic review system, and it just means that each person gets to know the student in their environment, academic, and who they are based on what they put in the application, and that's what we use. It's not like some students wrote an awesome essay and students like them, but the person that read that essay has no idea what their academics is like. So, that just, we came to realize that holistic review of someone reading everything in once is the better way to go. And this is how actually a lot of the private schools, those well-known, again, top 10 private schools use as well, or a very similar system. I do want to mention that because of the competitive level of high school admissions, because high school admissions is more competitive, there is also the transfer option as well. So going to community college is the best way to go, and most students, after they transfer, they graduate in 2 years, sometimes 3, depending on how long it takes. It's up to their pace, but they get the same degree, and we work closely with the community colleges, and the admissions rate in most cases for transfer students is higher, meaning that it's, in the end, that's less competitive, so easier to be admitted. So that's the trend that we also see as well, and we've been encouraging students and parents to consider that option, because you still get a great quality of education, but in just the last 2 years. And if you have any questions about that, I do have some handouts on my desk again. So when do I apply? It's going to be in the fall term. The application website goes online October 1st, so you can start filling it out, but you can't submit it until November 1st to 30th. And we always give this 1 month for students to submit it. There's no advantage to submitting early in November to late November. Just don't wait till the 29th or the 30th. We tell students this all the time, but students always wait till the last minute. But sometimes the web server has slowed down dramatically, so when you press submit, then there's this really long turn, it's not submitting kind of thing. So I wouldn't want to go through that. I always tell students to submit it during Thanksgiving weekend. Is the latest you probably want to do it. So, and I hope that if you're a senior right now, you're thinking about, or you already started writing your personal statement a little bit. For students that are younger, think about what you want to put in your personal statement, right? What kind of things to make you stand out or shine is what you want to keep in mind. And UC is notifying sometime in March to late April, and the application fee now is $70 per campus. One convenient thing, though, is that it's one application for all the UC system. So if you apply to 4 campuses, each campus will receive the same application, but we will review your application independently.